So, what you're about to see is kind of a tale of two water crystals. It's a simple visual story that kicks off with a scientific mystery so strange, it almost seems impossible. Okay, so look at this. On the left, you've got a frozen drop of pure distilled water. It's this amorphous, kind of undefined blob, which, is exactly what you'd expect. But on the right, that's a drop from the exact same water. And it's transformed into this stunningly complex, perfectly symmetrical crystal. So the big question is, right, what in the world could cause a difference like that? How does water go from being an unstructured blob to a work of art, a highly organized crystal? Let's dive into the scientific report that looked into this very thing. To find the answer, we have to look at the experiment they ran. And what's wild is that it was an elegantly simple process that took only 3 minutes to get these absolutely startlingly different results. So where did this come from? Well, the analysis was done by the Wasserkristall Institut over in Switzerland. These are the folks who specialize in, photographing frozen water formations. And the findings we're looking at here are straight from their November 2023 report. So what was the one thing they introduced that could have caused this? It's this device, the Super Bloc, from a company called Leela Quantum Tech. Now, the researchers are super clear about this. They're only reporting the manufacturer's claim that this thing emits what they call quantum energy fields. And the process itself? Super straightforward. You're not going to believe how simple this was. They took some distilled water. They put it near the Super Bloc for just 3 minutes. Get this, no physical contact. And then they just froze tiny drops of that water and took pictures of them under a microscope. Simple, clean, and really direct. Okay, so before we jump to the really cool pictures, we have to talk about the control sample. In any good science, you need a baseline, right? You gotta know what you're comparing it to. So let's check out the untreated water first. And you might be asking, why distilled water? Well, that's kind of the genius of it. Because it's so incredibly pure, it almost never forms those beautiful, complex crystals on its own. It's basically a perfect blank canvas, which means if any kind of cool structure does show up, it's a really big deal. And here it is. This is that blank canvas we were talking about. This is the frozen drop from the water they didn't do anything to, just like they expected. It's kind of hazy, no real structure, nothing like a snowflake at all. The scientists, of course, had a more technical way of putting it. They called the control sample amorphous and irregular, pointing out that it was completely missing that classic 6-sided shape you see in snowflakes. Again, totally what they expected to see. All right, so you've got the baseline burned into your brain, right? An irregular blob. Now, get ready. Let's see what happened to the water that sat near the Super Bloc for just 3 little minutes. I'm gonna say it again. 3 minutes. That was literally the only thing that was different between the two samples. And boom, here's the result. I mean, the difference is just staggering, right? All of a sudden, you have this perfectly formed 6-sided crystal. This is the kind of thing that, according to the textbook, just shouldn't happen with distilled water. And this wasn't just a lucky shot either. They kept seeing it over and over. Here's another one. And look, this one's even more complex. You can see these little secondary and tertiary branches starting to form off the main arms. A third drop shows this stunning pattern, which the report calls elaborate geometric faceting. The internal complexity is just wow. And one more for good measure. Here the researchers noted its high degree of structural organization. The point is, what they saw in the treated water samples was incredibly consistent. So, okay, the pictures speak for themselves. They're pretty compelling. But what did the Institute actually conclude from all this? What does it all mean? This table really just lays it all out side by side. It's so clear. The control sample, no symmetry, no branching, low complexity. The treated sample, bam, perfect hexagonal symmetry, complex branching, and high structural complexity. The data just doesn't lie. So in their official discussion, the researchers said there was a, and I quote, notable qualitative difference. Pretty much an understatement, right? The control water did exactly what distilled water does. But the treated water, it consistently popped out these complex hexagonal crystals. Their best guess is that this could be tied to some kind of fundamental change in the water's actual structural properties. But here's a really important point, and you gotta respect them for this. The researchers are very, very careful not to get ahead of themselves. They make sure to include this qualifier, stating that the study is observational and qualitative. That's just good science, right? They're saying, hey, this is what we saw, not this is the final definitive answer on everything. So the bottom line of the whole report is measured and cautious. A visually significant difference was clearly documented. I mean, you can't really argue with the photos, but they rightly categorize these results as preliminary.
And that really leaves us with a huge, fascinating question, doesn't it? If you just set aside the specific device for a second, the very idea that any kind of outside influence could be associated with such a massive change in water structure and in only 3 minutes, that's profound. It kind of makes you wonder, what else don't we know about the most basic, most common substance on our entire planet?